Hello and welcome to episode 392 of the Crate and Crowbar, a gaming podcast being recorded on the 9th of February 2022. I'm Marsh Davis, and tonight I'm joined by an ancient power masquerading as a mischievous woodland sprite, Tom Senior.
I am a mischievous woodland sprite. I always thought that about myself. How do you know me so well?
Ancient tomes told me of your true nature.
To be revealed on the 400th episode of the Crate and Crowbar.
Oh, yeah, we've got that coming up. Gosh,
Yeah, we should probably do something.
I'm sure something extra special come together.
I'm sure it will.
Or it'll be an ordinary podcast. One of the two.
Yeah.
Could be either.
Talk about the Matrix for 3.5 hours, all bombs.
Okay. Yeah, I had to edit that.
Well, you edited it down to 3.5.
yeah. It was only a little bit longer than that.
I actually haven't listened to it yet because I think I hate the film.
Yes. I mean, I'd say the first 2.5 hours of that podcast are some deep and potent insight, which convinced me to like the film more. And then the last part, the booze takes hold, and it becomes a completely different, but also equally enjoyable podcast.
I'm going to paint some inches this weekend. Looking forward to catching up on that particular hot take fest.
Talking of hot takes, I believe that you have one, perhaps, about the sequel to Dying Light.
Sequel to Dying Light 2, Stay Human. It is a first-person open-world survival game from Techland, I believe. And it's been in development for ages. It feels like it's been delayed like a few times as well. And essentially, it's a game where you're in a zombie apocalypse, and a plague is spread across the land, leaked by a mysterious, nefarious scientific organization called the GRE, and loads of people who are still alive are actually infected with it. But UV light repels the zombification, and you can use certain inhalers to hold back the illness. Hence, the staying human part of the tagline.
Are you inhaling UV light?
Yeah, well, it's sort of it's color coded. You immunity boosters they're called, but they're also just it's a bit. So there's a lot of this game that obviously this game has taken years and years to make, but it is torn from the shittiest headlines of our time. Like, you know, in terms of like torn from the headlines plots you'd want to put together in the current moment. If you dislike the idea of living in an era of disease has inhibited everyone's lives. The idea of using light to correct that, as one former president tried to propose in a very famous speech, it manages to hit all those points, surely by accident, because all of this must have been written before that all happened, probably. Then we'll come on to the Rising. So essentially, like, it's a parkour game, basically. It's basically, think of it as like Mirror's Edge, but occasionally you hit 100 zombies and they explode. That is quite essentially the fundamental appeal of this game. And on that point, it's fun. I do actually quite enjoy it. I put quite a lot of hours into it now. You run across districts using cracked binoculars to magically detect landmarks. And some of them are like windmills, which supply power to the local area. And then if you capture the sort of mega landmark, you get to assign that area to a faction. And as is always the case in these games, the two factions are just ludicrously opposed, and not like indicative of what humans would do believably in any context. So you've got the hey, let's listen to Metric and party on a big dance floor faction, and you've got the authoritarian let's all be gruff soldiers and hit people faction. There's no in between in human nature, as we know from video games. Like there's no spectrum. Or luckily they're both facing the same threats in the guise of a massive zombie problem, and also just maniacs, like, you know, Mad Max type maniacs that just believe in nothing and actually have no motivation. They're essentially just a more interesting combat challenge than zombies. That's why they exist, as far as I could tell. But as you assign, there's some clever ideas in it, in that when you assign an area to a faction, it unlocks different traversal objects within the zone that you've tilted it towards. The let's dance to Metric all night and do drugs faction, they love zip lines. So if you assign a zone to those guys, you get this. The area is populated by zip lines all over the place. Whereas the other guys, I think they like jump pads. So you get loads of cool jump pads, loads of fun ways to get from the ground level up to a third, fourth story of a building. And actually, just moving around the world, I found really, just generally, really, really fun. You are basically superhuman for silly plot reasons, so you get to jump ridiculous distances. It's quite forgiving with grabbing ledges, which is a key part of like this whole thing working with first-person platforming. And as soon as you start unlocking like wall runs and double jumps, and you start chaining that into like grappling hooks, and then it feels very freeform. That combined with all the traversal objects that your faction unlocks creates just something that's actually very fascinating. It's really fun to unlock little safe houses at night, and these little patches of glowing purple UV light that recharge your humanity basically, and stop you from sliding on a timer into full zombie mode, which is death basically. That
So are
is
you always on a timer?
only at night.
Oh, okay. Yes,
And
well, that makes sense.
the day-night cycle is a big part of the game as well. There are certain so at night, the infected roam the streets because they don't like sunlight because of the UV content. During the day, the weak ones wander around smoking. It's just like smoke coming off them as they burn in the sunlight. That means that certain areas at night, the undead will cluster in and become very difficult combat challenges. So, but if you wait until the day, they sort of mill around and go out into the streets, and those locations become much safer to explore. So you start planning your game time around the types of challenges you want to access that are best available depending on the time of day. And this is some of the best stuff about it is that there are various different types of sort of objective capture challenges. Some of them are towers like windmills, which are platforming challenges. Some of them are just kind of old shopping stores where if you take them on during the day, and you get extra rewards because it's more full of undead, and therefore you get to kill special undead, and that gets you trinkets and things like that. So the best version of this are that they're called GRE facilities, I think, and they're basically several levels deep, normally about 4 levels deep, and each level has a stash of stuff that actually levels you up properly. If you take it on at night, things is much easier, and it becomes a challenge about a stealth challenge where you sneak around, break the decks of a few zombies, grab some inhibitors, which is what levels you up, and then find your way down to the lower level, all while unlocking shortcuts that let you, should you choose to return to the surface because you're running out of time, you can return to that location quickly, get back down to where you were. And there's something like feels really organic about it, in that you can choose to go and shop for those things whenever you like, wherever you are in the story. The zones that you visit are sort of level capped in a way, like if you go into a level 5 zone as a level 1 character, you're not going to last very long, but it feels just soft enough. Like, feels like it's the same balance Far Cry I think has achieved, where there's a loose sense, it gives you a loose sense of getting more powerful, while also just kind of creating just enough friction and a sense of exploration and success as you unlock each new area, and unlock each new tower and each new cache and each new little sort of safe zone that becomes a little beacon of light at night. And actually, the texture of the game in terms of just how you're spending your time feels lovely. Like, it's really well paced, which is a really difficult thing to achieve in an open world game, where what if player just wanders around stupidly and doesn't pursue anything? Well, you kind of like, the game is always giving you stuff to pursue like nearby, and you're always getting like little calls on the radio, little incidental sort of moments, a bit like in Red Dead Redemption 2. You know how many people you run into who've been bitten by a snake? It's a bit like that, but for a zombie apocalypse. Like, help, Then you go and hit a zombie, and it spirals away, ragdolling all the way, several somersaults backwards, blood just sprays all over the street, and it's like, oh, that was fun. But technically, like, the big problem with the game is like combat is fundamentally a bit busted in terms of actual progression. You get 2 skill trees. There's a traversal skill tree, and there's the combat skill tree. Traversal skill tree is really fun, it's full of loads of exciting abilities. Lets you jump further, climb higher, wall run. The combat side of the tree is just straight up bad. Like the start, I sort of scroll over it. I'm like, I don't want to do any of this, which is incredible.
What stuff is not appealing?
So, for example, a big mechanic is stagger, and stagger is a state enemies can enter apparently at random. Like sometimes a zombie will walk towards you and trip and stagger, and you unlock ways to take advantage of stagger. And the main one that is first introduced as a big part of the tree is that you get to vault over and kick something behind it really hard. But in practice, there's nothing behind it, like 80% of the time. And so what you do is you vault over this staggered enemy. It looks really cool, and you see your 2 big stupid feet like right in front of you, like a missile, heading directly into the side of a car. And it's like fundamentally like all of the abilities around stagger. I'm just like, why isn't there just an ability that when a zombie is staggered, why can't I just punch them hard enough that a shockwave happens or something? Just a lot of stuff that just seems you would think would be there that would be just instinctively fun and improve crowd control, because that's of course it's a zombie apocalypse game. It's all about loads about crowd control. Why is the first thing, the big thing that you want us to do is to stagger, vault over, and kick an enemy that won't be there 90% of the time? And it's really annoying to aim, and it flies miles, and sometimes it just flies over stuff that might be behind the thing you're trying to hit as well. And it's just it's a shame. I just resorted to basically crafting the most powerful weapon and just repeatedly hitting the attack button over and over again, occasionally holding it down for a stronger attack. And that's unfortunately like as much fun as I've managed to get out of the combat system.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's a real shame because like the actual parkour stuff, the careful scattering of objectives, the day-night cycle, all of that is actually I've really enjoyed. It's really decent. So yeah.
Is it as much of a survival game as the last one? I did give Dying Light 1 a go, but I found it a little bit fussy and oppressive in the whole kind of survival aspects. I heard this one is a bit gentler.
Yeah, it's much gentler, especially with the timer that starts when you're in the dark. I think it starts about 5 minutes, and that's actually ages. Like you have time to, and you have much easier access to objects that recover your humanity, including just glowing blue mushrooms that you'll find on rooftops randomly. But like you can chew on those, feel a bit more human, feel a bit less zombie, and carry on with your adventures. Then you can quickly craft stuff that almost instantly replenishes your humanity. And as you level up, the timer gets longer and longer. So I'm up to about like 7.5 minutes now.
Oh, right.
So I could do most of a dungeon in the time I have, and I've got loads of replenishment items. So it feels like I could basically stay there all night if I want to. But the problem is, as soon as dawn comes, all the undead come back inside, and the area gets much more difficult. So you're on a different timer. You're on the day-night cycle timer. But it's pretty elegant actually. I really like it.
Yeah, I mean, you're making it sound quite good, but like I've played Techland's other games, so I just don't quite believe it.
Yeah, so there is some Techland junk present. I've found in my particular copy of the game, which I've been playing on PS5. After a certain amount of time, all of the performances that you have, like people performing in first person during cutscenes, every object that is a human disappears, and every object that is not a human continues to float in midair and sort of go along their gesture path, which has created like some really dramatic moments where I've just bonded with these a squad of troops that's been sent on this suicide mission, and the guy's dying in my arms, but all I can see is his floating talk radio. It's just kind of like bobbling around in front of me as he's crying about his lost son or something.
Oh, God.
And then your character kind of like arms cradle this invisible man down, and then do the whole like closing the dead eyes thing, to a completely invisible ragdoll thing. You can restart the game to get it back and to fix everything, but I choose not to. It's extremely good. It's really good. I love not knowing who I'm working for at all. Having literally no face-to-face contact with the people giving me missions. They're just like, oh, that's floating knife guy. I like him.
Why have you become the arbiter between these two warring factions?
For no fucking reason. There's points in the story where you have you're kind of like from the outside of the city, and you're a pilgrim. That's what they're called, a specialist who lives in the wilds and delivers messages and packages between cities, and that gives you the superhuman ability to climb towers that no one has ever climbed before. And that is key to human civilization, which is not just Techland's fault, but a lot of video games' fault. That like getting to the high bit lets you change the world for some reason. It's a universally accepted fact of open world games. Go to the high bit and you get some. You both A, get something, and B, change something. And yeah, all of the major kind of story plot missions so far have revolved around getting to the top of the thing that no one else has been able to get to the top of before. And the thing that breaks it is that I was talking earlier about the fact you could give districts to one faction or another. You could do one of those missions, then instantly go to a story mission with a faction that you've just clearly betrayed, just like absolutely just giving it to the anarchists, and the military guys will also treat you like a true hero and love you and invite you into their arms. And as you travel between there's absolutely no unfortunately like no through line between the faction tilting you're doing in terms of like moment to moment open world stuff and the actual story the game's trying to tell. And it creates ridiculous moments that are just, to me, extremely funny. But if you're looking for an intense narrative, The Last of Us style game, whoa boy, do not play this one. It's a game. It's very difficult to solve that problem. I prefer, because I care less about the story, so I prefer that they've gone for the ability to flip zones as an open world ongoing thing that you could choose to pursue instead of the story, because you can still level up. You don't there are certain points in the story where you make big decisions about which side you'll go to favor, but actually leveling up and actually improving your skills, you could just go about your own business and raid all of the GRE caches and level up on those terms. So you really can you can use this open world to find the type of fun that you want. Unfortunately, the type of fun it's chosen with this combat system is to vault over a man and hit nothing over and over again, or shove them, or just move them sideways and stuff like that. It's just like, there's loads of abilities about falling and crushing things in different ways. I don't understand it. It's like, I don't care if I there's like, so there's the kill them by falling on them attack, but there's also the kill them by falling on them and but their head explodes attack, and those separate unlocks on the combat tree. I was like, I don't particularly. Why is that an option? Like, what does that mean for my life in the game? Whether I crush this thing's head or not? Like, it's just really strange. Like, it's possible that once it's unlocked, like maybe there's a kind of imagined way you're supposed to approach the combat system that makes it awesome and makes you turns the parkour that you're doing on the parkour skill tree into a form of combat. I just haven't found it, and I've played it for like 10 hours, 15 hours maybe. So I have a feeling it's probably just bad, actually. Yeah.
When do you get there's a grappling hook? Is that right?
Yep, there is a grappling hook. The good thing about the grappling hook is that you grapple onto anything, and that lets you gives you a sense of freedom. Bad news is that it ruins the UI, because there's a permanent, constant grappling hook, reticule that is just roaming the screen endlessly, telling you where you can grapple all the time. So like it's made the game like just objectively worse to look at for me because because the game is constantly telling me like what I'm looking at. Your character's arms reach out in various directions to tell you when you can safely make a jump. Excellent, very good. But I'm always distracted. It's like a fly buzzing around your head all the time. Oh, you could grapple this, you grapple this, you grapple this. You could grapple flipping everything. So it's just like literally just sliding around walls as you're going down corridors and stuff. It's extremely irritating, and it seems like a thing that it's possible that I might be able to turn it off somewhere in the options menu. But the fact that that's my enduring emotional impression of the grappling hook.
Oh dear.
It's just that it's perhaps not so good. Wall running is really good though. Vaulting off little ledges, and even there's a parkour move that lets you vault off the undead to higher ledges, which is and there's one that you can unlock to make you sprint, and when you do, you become like the Incredible Hulk or Juggernaut from the Marvel Universe, where you just you send the the infected just sprawling everywhere like a bowling ball going through them. Really, really good. But then combat side not so good. So it's a hard one to recommend, especially because February is just a ridiculous month for games. We've got Elden Ring coming later.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
Surely that's the one. That's the year done. Maybe unless something is drastically changed about how those games are put together. There's also I'm really excited about Horizon, the new Horizon Zero Dawn game. What's it called? Something about
Frozen
Forbidden West.
Forbidden West. Thank you.
I think that's out next week or something.
Yeah.
And then this is out like this week, and also like so much all of a sudden of this deluge of intense new stuff. What have you chosen to play yourself, Marsh?
I've been playing Expeditions Rome.
Ooh.
Which is apparently the third in the Expeditions turn-based tactics series, of which I was hitherto completely unaware.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've heard of them.
No, I've not. No.
But I've been having a pretty good time with it. It's sort of scrappy. It's like overly complicated in parts and overly simplistic in others. And I don't even know that it manages to connect those parts together that elegantly at times. But it's also doing something which is sort of different from a lot of other turn-based tactics games, like in terms of the experience that it's trying to reach for, which is that it sort of roots its turn-based tactics battles in a much grander strategic layer, where you're also commanding and managing a Roman legion as it conquers various lands, and so it sort of ultimately gives you like the moment-to-moment tactical management of something like Divinity: Original Sin or similar, but also gives you access to like a Total War style abstracted battle simulator and a whiff of grand strategy in a overworld map that you can trot your legions across and capture resources and stuff. And there's like interpersonal, politics amongst the squad that you used in those turn-based parts of the game. And you can resolve that by like chatting them up and occasionally building them nice bathhouses.
That's how it's done.
And there's a sort of light King of Dragon Pass style text-based sort of conundrums that you bump into when traveling across the overworld map as well.
Oh God,
so it's this weird mixture of stuff.
It sounds like the Banner Saga mashed into Total War ?
Yeah, that's not a bad pitch for it. I mean, it's strange. Like it's a lot of stuff, and the game itself is hugely long as well, much longer than I actually probably have time to ever complete. But each part of what I've just described is in itself sort of quite slight and digestible for like better and worse. Like some things feel like, oh, they've really streamlined this, and this feels quite appropriate and fits in without getting kind of too bogged down. And other things just feel just slightly threadbare and not quite, finished in a way that feels satisfying. But so this is the setup. It's 81 BC. Rome is just emerging from a civil war, which has been won, I think, by enemies of your family. And you are the child of a recently murdered Roman senator And so rather than hang around in Rome itself waiting to be fucking shanked, you are dispatched to the relative safety of war, which will become known as the Second Mithridatic War, which was waged between Rome and the Kingdom of Pontus. I looked up on Wikipedia, which I should have remembered from school, but I did not. Anyway, the plan is initially that you just hang around the command tent without getting your hands dirty. But that would make for a really, really bad turn-based tactics game. So events force you into combat with like pirates, and then the pirates are being aided by the rebel island of Lesbos, and then there's the larger kingdom of Pontus as well to contend with. And as your role within the Legion grows, you start kind of encountering larger and larger sort of powers to contend with. But there's a lot I like about the combat,
right?
And there's some stuff that just hasn't come together for me yet. But I wonder if some of that stuff is just because I'm at the lower end of the power curve, and maybe as the game progresses, you get more freedom within it. But so this is how a turn-based tactics level engagement works. They're usually quite large, complicated environments, and these are overlaid with a hex-based navigation when combat kicks off. And at the beginning of combat, you get this preparation phase, which allows you to place all of your units, not within a vast area, within a quite contained area, but at least it means you get to put your your folks with the shields in front of the people with the bows and arrows. So that sort of makes sense. And then you take turns with the AI to move all of your units. So, I mean, to be clear, when it's your go, you move all of your units in one go. And you can do that in any order. You can move them partially, then move another guy, then go back to the first guy, make an attack with that guy, then move them again. You can even issue commands to one unit while another character is doing something else. So all of that feels very freeing, and it's quite a different pace from a lot of turn-based tactics games. But it also places like a huge complexity burden on that singular turn. Which is, you have a lot of decisions to make during that turn, and there's a lot of ways in which you can min-max those decisions. Whereas in like something where you have, individual units taking turns based on their initiative order, like in Divinity: Original Sin, like each turn feels a lot more manageable because the number of decisions you're making has been sort of like parceled out amongst your units. And so it feels kind of a bit more approachable. But here you're just like, it's everything at once, So there's a lot to think about. But it does make for a kind of more dynamic, sort of looser experience than those games, because there's rarely an obvious optimal action to take on any given go.
I was going to ask about that, because it's like, for me, the anxiety of those particular sort of systems is that there is a perfect way of doing this, and I'm not hitting it. And even if I was hitting it, I wouldn't know it. And that there's a precise way there's a perfect way I could move every single unit and attack at precisely the right moment to get the most damage out of my squad. And I feel like I've not calculated it to the extent required. And that's a kind of weird anxiety I get with those games sometimes.
Oh no, I think that's damn dead on. Yeah, I do. But at a certain point, I feel like the possibility space is so large that I literally couldn't ever apprehend it.
Yeah.
And so there's a sort of like, fuck it, kind of switch that gets flipped on in my brain.
Yeah.
And then I don't feel the stress of it anymore, because I just give up hoping to completely perfectly play the game. But to which end I've actually turned down the difficulty. It has a huge number of difficulty sliders, which affect different parts of the game, which is really cool. But I found that maybe because I'm not smart enough to work out how to optimally play with all the units and all their skills and all the different ways in which they combine. I found the difficulty was all over the place.
Right.
And, after kind of trouncing my way through early missions, I got into a combat, and like within a turn, nothing I could have done to stop like 3 of my units being absolutely destroyed. And I didn't find that was very satisfactory. So I turned down the difficulty.
Is there kind of the damage and stuff? Are there randomization factors as well in the way things attack, hit, deal damage?
Yeah, yes, and not so much though. So like a lot of stuff feels pretty guaranteed. Like if you can shoot somebody with a bow and arrow, you just always, there's 100% certainty that you hit, unless the circumstances are beyond your range,
Right.
which is very, very generous. So that doesn't happen very often. You can deliver glancing blows occasionally, but the percentage of times in which that happens also seems to be generous. Maybe that changes as the game goes on and you encounter enemies with better armor. I don't know. But it doesn't feel too kind of like reliant on RNG to make success out of it. But I'd say like, okay, so there's your units come in a bunch of different possible classes, which have access to 3 different skill trees each, through which you unlock your kind of hotbar actions, which are usually different kinds of attack. And then weapons and equipment are class agnostic on top of that, and you can pick them up from anywhere. And each weapon comes with its own variety of actions. Sometimes more actions than you can actually equip to your hotbar, so you have to make choices about which skills you want to kind of pluck from the weapon. And there are synergies between these classes and weapons, which are kind of cool. There's this class called Veles, which is this kind of scrappy close combat fighter, sort of like a rogue class, I guess, in a trad RPG. It's like a gladiator plays the first Veles character that you have, and that feels quite fitting. And he has a bunch of skills which make him able to kind of move around enemies without taking attacks of opportunity, and he builds up this focus bar which you can then spend on other attacks instead of using action points. And if you pair that with like a dagger and spear combo, you get these attacks that stack bleeding damage, and they do like multiples of damage when an enemy is flanked. And like all of that stuff, like I think the way they've described these different fighters through the skills available to them is really kind of evocative. It's quite articulate and it feels quite clever. But it feels like they end up throwing so many skills and status effects at that fantasy that the game struggles to kind of cohere all of that actually while you're playing. So a lot of the stuff ends up feeling like out of sync with the sort of like cadence of the games. Like you think from what I've just described that you'll be able to make use of these synergies, but often like some of the synergies will rely on you having to make multiple attacks on the same character whilst they have this status effect. But then the status effect expires after a turn. You only get 1 attack per turn, and if you hit them twice, they're dead. So you gain this effect, but you have nothing to apply it to. Yeah. These sort of things, it just feels like I'm trying to work. This is the kind of stuff that excites me about tactics games, is building and stacking these sort of synergies. And every time I feel like I'm planning towards something, I don't quite manage it, and the opportunity sort of evaporates. And that happens so much. Like I feel like it's not just me being stupid, although that probably is like 90% of it.
It sounds delicious though. Like it's the sort of game I can imagine sort of thinking about on coffee breaks. Be like, oh, like if I had a certain type of equipment on a certain class, and I had a couple of those, and then also they moved alongside this other guy who could inflict bleeding damage. Like I feel I can sort of sense that there's a lot of kind of possibility, like ability to express yourself through like the way you want to actually pursue the combat scenarios, but in execution, perhaps it's too opportunistic. If it's those effects are so time limited, then like how can you guarantee that the enemy will move into a position to even allow the synergies to happen?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I mean, I've experienced exactly what you say, where I've been thinking about this game later and thought, oh, actually, you know what? I could do this and this and this. And I think there's a really, I think as the game gets along, I will be able to carve out some kind of mechanical niche within it, which makes it feel kind of synergistic, exciting, and just discard like 80% of the game. And that feels like I'm playing the game wrong in a way, but also I think that's the only way that you're going to get this stuff. Because if you go for the whole full spread of what the game offers, you're just never going to be able to find those opportunities. I think like there's there's one of your units can stick a spear through somebody's ankle, and it gives them this stuck status effect. And obviously, you want to hit that unit with another attack, which like does a multiple of damage to stuck targets. But it's almost impossible to engineer those circumstances, I found, at least in the early game, because often the character who can exploit that status is the one who's dealt it, and they've just used up their single attack to deal it, so they don't get to hit him again. And because of either like RNG or by design, the weapons that my other characters have at the beginning of the game that are at their disposal just exploit different status effects. And there is just a bewildering number of incredibly similar status effects. It's like your zombie being, whether you drop on his head or you drop on his head and his head explodes. Like, it makes no difference. Like, there is stuck, there's harried, there's crippled, there's knocked down, there's stunned, there's sundered, there's bleeding, there's weakened, there's exposed, marked, challenged, and assessed. All of which are effects which will increase the damage done. Assessed, yeah, because you like assessed them. You look them up and down. You've worked out what their weakness is. I guess is what that implies. But
great.
But like, you just don't need that many. Like, it's just impossible to remember even which guy has a sword.
War is hell, and hell must be described with many different adjectives and verbs.
Yes.
That's incredible, though. Was one of them harassed? Did you say?
Harried.
Harried. How do you harry someone in war?
I guess, but there's also panicked as well. But I don't know that. I don't think panicked. Harried is the one of those two which has like, if you hit them while they're harried, they take extra damage. Whereas I think if you hit somebody while they're panicked, they don't necessarily take extra damage.
Right.
But they are in some other way. I don't know.
Harried is like they've been pecked at by a bird, and then someone hits them, follows up with a mace, and that does like so much more damage. Interesting. It sounds like sounds intense.
There are 59 positive status effects and 40 negative ones according to the wiki, and that doesn't even include individual parts of your body being wounded. I appreciate
how
the
many
detail.
games did they make? That's incredible.
Yeah. It's just impossible to hold it on your head. Maybe over time I will, but like I say, I think what I've just got to do is I've just got to pick like a subset that I know how to work with and just use that. I think like there is a pleasure to just orchestrating your team in union and combining and stacking those various abilities in complementary ways. But I think just like a slightly simpler, maybe not as simple as rock, paper, scissors, but something more approachable actually outweighs the maximalist let's simulate everything approach.
I'm used to like pin and flank stuff. Those are the two words that I understand.
Yeah, you do get flanking bonuses.
I'm sure you do. I'd expect that from a turn-based strategy game. This sounds wild. I've got to try it.
I think I do recommend it. There's some other weird stuff in there as well, which I can't quite get my head around. Like I found that one of my units just run out of the ability to attack. Like all of his attack skills happen to be charge based, and he only had like 3.
Oh, no.
And then it was like, swords are not. They're not. You don't need ammunition for swords. Famously, they don't. You don't need to charge them. But he was just like, oh, can't do anything here.
But Marsh, there are so many games where you charge swords. There's so many games where you hold them back.
Oh no, sorry. I don't mean you charge up the sword. I mean the sword has 3 charges. It has 3 times you can use that skill.
And then it's done, and then you can't hit with the sword again.
No,
the sword is tired now.
Exactly. You can switch. Each character has an alternative weapon loadout, which weirdly requires you to have entirely different weapons from the weapon loadout you normally use. So, I mean, you can't use the same shield, even if you want both weapon loadouts to have a shield. You have to have 2 shields. Doesn't make much sense. But anyway, I guess you could switch to just bare knuckle fighting, and then you would have basic attacks again. But yeah, I was kind of confused as to that. It costs a turn to switch weapons as well in the game, so it's not something to do lightly. Yeah, but I do. I have been finding it fun. As I get along, like there are little niches I can find within that combat system which feel quite satisfying.
Does the kind of narrative stuff like tie back into the combat system at all, or is it just kind of like a separate strata of the game?
It's supposed to. It promises that it does. I haven't seen it have any effect. So certainly the combat ties back into the narrative. That way around definitely happens to a small amount. In that there's been a mission where you could choose to be sneaky or do a full frontal assault, and characters in your party have different opinions on this. And if you choose one or the other, one of the characters thinks less of you and is a bit shitty about it. I don't know what the long-term implications of that are, and I don't think it affects what they do in combat. Like, I don't. Maybe there is a morale stat, as you might imagine. There's a stat for fucking everything, so there's obviously a morale stat. Maybe that affects morale in some way. In the larger game, that does make a difference because. So you also have these legion camps that you can visit, and you can recruit centurions to lead the abstracted total war style battles.
Right.
And they have similar attributes as the Praetorians, who are the turn-based squad. And each of these characters will have a disposition towards you, which will affect their success in these abstracted turn-based battles. They may be like, if they're disgruntled, there may be a higher insubordination, and what's it called when soldiers leave, just fuck off and don't come back.
Desert.
Deserts, that's it. Yeah, more soldiers might desert if your commander is disgruntled. So, I guess that's a sort of way in which the mechanics tie into some sort of loose narrative.
They just kind of like a resource farming exercise, a bit like, how you send assassins off in certain Assassin's Creed games, and they go off and they complete their thing and come back. And
yes and no. So you can do that. I mean, you use your legion definitely to acquire resources on the map, but you also need to periodically defeat large armies as part of the narrative, and that involves like laying siege to Mytilene, and you have to pick a centurion who's got a who's got a particular talent for the kind of battle that's coming up. You get some kind of clues as to how that works, and then you get this 2D battlefield view in which you see these icons representing different units moving back and forth, and the battle goes through a number of different phases, and each phase like prompts random events to occur, which like a little card pop-up appears saying such and such and such and such has happened. What strategy would you like to use to react to this? And you can earn sort of like more possible reactions by building a particular tent in your base. I don't know that I find that level of detail terribly kind of rewarding. Like I'll probably just auto-resolve most of these battles if I can get away with it. But I do like the fact that there is some sort of abstraction of being a big military dude as part of the role play that's going on. But apparently this is all going to get ripped out anyway. Because the devs put out a dev diary saying this part of the game didn't go down too well. So they're completely revising it. They still don't want to build like a full war game inside their tactical RPG, which I think is sort of fair.
Sounds
but they are trying to make it feel less arbitrary. I don't know if what they've suggested sounds better though. I can't even be bothered to explain it. It won't mean anything. But like, I think it's really cool that the devs are looking to essentially overhaul this part of this sort of almost unasked for part of the game. And it's a design challenge I don't envy, because it's building something to be as rich and rewarding as possible within something that is scoped not to take the focus of the game, which is an incredibly hard task.
Do you feel like it's all pointing towards one coherent fantasy at the end of it? Like, do you feel like a Legion commander?
Yeah, I do, and I think that even though those parts of the game, like the camp management stuff, isn't stuff I'm particularly excited by, and I find it a bit of a chore. Like, if it wasn't there, I would feel like it had sold the idea of being, a part of a Legion less. I think it wouldn't be successful, which is odd that I actually want the parts of the game that I don't like. But would you like to hear the sad coda to this?
Another
sad coda.
Yeah.
So I feel like Expeditions is sort of at the cusp of being a really great tactics game. Like, do you remember Shadow Tactics by Me?
Oh yeah, really good.
And that was just before they released like the much more kind of like perfectly realized Desperados 3, I felt like we're at the same tipping point with Expeditions where, it's just like finding its feet in this weird, interesting hybrid niche that it's found. I
Yeah.
feel like the developers just needed one more go at the thing to kind of distill that really well. But apparently they're not going to get the chance
Oh no.
because Logic Artists, the developers behind the game, are dissolving the studio, and they're going to be reborn as Dynasty Studios, which will exclusively focus on NFT games. That's the right noise, Tom.
You just inflicted the NFT status on me. Now I die. That is, for all the sentences I expected you to say,
it's the saddest, isn't it?
it's actually really quite sad. I hope they all make loads of money and are happy, but that's really disappointing.
Yeah, they're going to be
NFT games.
stuck in a vision of player-driven on-chain economic strategies to further enhance AAA gameplay, Tom.
This. Please make the game about the Romans.
Yeah. They're making an MMO survival game, apparently, which
Okay.
is
Yeah, they'll definitely make that.
and sell the hats.
It'll definitely be completed and
yeah.
succeed.
So goodbye forever to those developers, I guess, which is a shame.
Hopefully, that the ideas and the skills that have brought them to bear on the series so far will find home in other places, perhaps. Or
yeah, it's not clear. Yeah. I mean, THQ Nordic published it. Maybe they own the license to Expeditions, and perhaps they can attract some other developers back from the new studio to work on further Expeditions games, or not. I don't know, but it does seem a shame that like it's at the cusp of doing something really interesting, and perhaps that will never be realized in this franchise.
It's worse than the zombie apocalypse. Even worse.
What have you been playing other than Dying Light, Tom?
So, for not much time so far, because it's only just come out, I've been playing Sifu from Slow Clap Games, who created Absolver, which was a really ambitious attempt to create an online martial arts game based around a skill-based system where you customize your moveset and ideally roll with pals to complete kill bosses. I think I've quite vague memories of it. It was quite difficult, and also the system whereby you select your own moveset from loads of different options, as seen famously in God Hand, is just very difficult to get hold of. What Sifu is instead is a third-person martial arts game. That I think the combat system I've seen it compared to God Hand, but it's actually functionally far closer to the Batman Arkham games.
Oh, right.
In that you are basically a kung fu master on a quest for revenge against the person who killed your master. And you do this by going into places and punching loads of people really, really fast. And the animations are fantastic in the sense of like just pummeling guys really quickly and just kicking them miles backwards into a pillar and then opening up like a finishing maneuver. It's really, really good, tight, delicious combat. Really, really nicely focused and well put together. Really nice systems for moving enemies around the battlefield. If you're in trouble and you're surrounded, you can perhaps kick someone sideways and then vault over an object to get some distance between you and the enemies, and sort of like it sort of feels really, really, really nice. Looks great as well, and is essentially I'm loving the combat so far. It's very much a kind of so you can block, but you're rewarded most for precise blocking. So pressing the button right before an attack hits you is kind of negates the damage they do to you, but also gives you kind of counter momentum where you can push forward with your fast attacks. And as you kind of kick more goons, you unlock XP to unlock more ways of kicking more goons, which is gaming's best reward loop. And the one that Dying Light 2 somehow failed to do, even though it had a really big kick in it. But Sifu is like it's just so far the epitome of such a focused game that wants to achieve a very precise fantasy, which is the martial arts, the kung fu revenge movie, but in a way where you are actually altering the action using skill and precision. And it's not just sort of there are kind of big finishing moves with like big kind of like combos and stuff when you actually finish people off, but it feels like you've achieved those using the skills that you've built up playing so far. And that ties into the progression system, which frankly I still don't understand. When, so whenever you die, you age and then resurrect in the same combat encounter as an older person. The older you get, the more damage you do, but the less health you have. And in between resurrections, you get the chance to unlock combat moves, sometimes temporarily for the course of that run, and sometimes for completely unknown reasons I cannot figure out, permanently forever for all the runs that you do.
Oh.
And sometimes you find these little idols that you can use to choose a health boost or a stamina boost or something, which are also temporary unless they're not. Sometimes I think it depends. I cannot figure it out at all.
So hang on. So is the whole game just like a single roguelike experience where you
I think
have to play these sequence of levels in that sequence from beginning to end to successfully complete the game?
so. I think it is slightly more complicated than that. In that, as you play through the levels and complete them more efficiently, when you beat the boss of the area, it almost serves as like it freezes your progress at the age at which you killed the boss. And doing so, I think, unlocks shortcuts and stuff through the levels and ways to more quickly complete the level. And I think, from what I gather so far, the aim is to basically hone your shortcuts and your skills with the combat system and your unlocked abilities into a boss rush that achieves revenge. I think.
Right, but you still have
That's
to
what it's
take
going for.
out all of the bosses in the game
I believe so
on a
in one
single run.
run. I
Right, okay.
believe so. I don't know. I wish the game would tell me. The game has not told me. I intentionally didn't. I was diligently would look up how it works before doing this podcast. But I think it's important to note that that has been so poorly communicated. In that on the death screen, you have this string of coins, and like they disappear each time you pass a decade of age, I think. And the decade step takes you into the next step of like higher damage, lower health. And when you get to 70, then you die, I think.
Yep, there are definitely no more ages older than that.
It's extraordinarily confusing and poorly communicated in the game, and I don't understand it at all. But the combat system is good enough to keep me coming back to find out what the hell is going on with it. And I think it's one I can report back on because I can't assess the roguelike aspect of it at all.
Well, you're not alone. I read 2 reviews of this game trying to work out whether I should drop $40 on it, sight unseen, and I didn't understand the progression mechanism from either of those 2 reviews' explanation of it. So I think it's still a bit bewildering to perhaps even people who've completed and reviewed the game. So
yeah, that's I don't think it's like it needs to be that clever. I think the idea of like aging and that corresponding to stat changes is really interesting. Your character model changes as well whenever you age. So you can sort of. I reached the final boss of the first area at age 70 because I didn't know what I was doing. But the idea of this kind of wizened martial arts expert where you can only take 2 hits, but when he hits you, God, you're done. Like that's pure kung fu movie stuff that's really like well integrated into the mechanics of the combat system. And the again, just the animation work and the sense of impact you get, and the responsiveness in dodging and instant blocking and counter attacking, it's all super on point. And that is just that's a rare thing to experience at that level. I think, like to that degree of quality. Whereas like Batman in the Arkham games intentionally feels very heavy, though obviously eventually develops the ability to fly literally 10 meters across the battlefield to hit a goon. The action in this is like really like well observed, and you'd never do anything like particularly impossible. You do stuff that is just looks like it's watching a martial arts master at work, except you're authoring it. and that is just always a cool fantasy. And I'm looking forward to playing more. I don't think I'll ever understand the aging thing.
Is it going to make me bite my controller in two?
Will it pass the Will Marsh Eater's controller test? I don't think so. I keep changing my mind about that. So I think that there are moments of great frustration in certain attacks on downed enemies. For me, just don't consistently happen. The trouble is, it stands out so much because the rest of the combat system is so precise and requires so much precision that when one ability doesn't trigger when you think it should, it really sticks out and like really becomes particularly irritating, especially if you're above the age of 50 and can't get punched more than once. Like your ability to stamp on a goon's head when you press circle when you've downed them using a complicated sweep move, like needs to be a kind of guaranteed win. In that you've achieved the context, but there's like one or two little moments where I've expected to push someone into a wall, and sometimes if you do a kind of push attack into a wall, it gives you an instant finish on them, just because they're so staggered and disoriented. You can just press two buttons on the controller to do your finisher on them, and that stuff is like it doesn't happen as often as I expect it to. I like none of these things are ever perfect. I don't expect it to happen like 100% of the time, but it's been enough to be noticeably annoying. I found so far, but to be honest, like it's stuff that I imagine they'll tune it because they've been doing like the Absolver combat system isn't too far off this, and I feel like they've been working on this sort of combat system for so long, and there's clearly so much experience and talent gone into it that like I'll definitely buy their next game, for example, based on that alone. Because I know it's going to have cool fighting in it, and lots of games try to do cool fighting like Dying Light 2 and slip up and don't quite hit the fantasy. I feel like Sifu's honed in on that one fantasy and nailed it pretty well so far.
Is it unapproachably hard?
For 40 quid it is.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, I don't want to put. I would love a demo for this because I don't want to put a lot of money down on it and just find that it's beyond my abilities as an aging, decrepit, weary man.
I often like sometimes watch streams for games from like streamers who just have played the game loads and are amazing at the game. That doesn't tell me anything about whether I like the game because I want to see the decrepit version of me on YouTube playing it, trying to get to grips with the combat system. You never get that. You never get the true experience where you see someone mess up repeatedly and just get stomped in the head until you're 70 years old and you just die automatically. Where's that on Twitch?
Yeah.
Come on, streamers.
We need absolute fools to play this game.
Yeah, please give me your most foolish attempts at getting good at games. That's a whole unexplored niche. And then actually seeing like messing up a game or seeing someone mess up a game, I think it's like really will tell me loads about whether I would like it or not. And that's actually like what eventually pushed me back to Dark Souls, was seeing people who just like, oh, you could just get this big claymore and do this and you'll be fine. And in Bloodborne, like I'll just get Ludwig's Holy Blade and you could swing it around, and it's still difficult, but it's this is how to sort of like get through it.
Yeah, honestly, I think that was what made me rank Sekiro slightly lower than the other Souls games. Is that there's really no way around some of those difficulty spikes. You just have to be good.
Yeah,
I'm not.
Yeah, there's no way to know until you've dropped quite a lot of money on the thing.
Right. Would you say this game doesn't Sifu fools gladly?
You killed me again.
Weakened you with the NFT status effect, and then came in for the killing blow.
I've been harried. Send help.
Talking of Souls games, I also played a bit of the Bloodborne PSX demake. Are you aware of this?
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen clips of it. What is it like?
Well, it is a masterwork by some very enterprising and brilliant developer to take Bloodborne and remake it fairly authentically with a lot of the features that Bloodborne actually has, but squeezed down to 135 megabytes. but then and it looks great, and apparently there's loads of other kind of stuff to it. It's not really just a recreation or a demake, as they're called. It's almost a love letter to Bloodborne. There's lots of extra stuff and in there. But then I was playing it, and I found it was just absolutely fucking horrible to play.
Really?
Because it's designed for a control pad which doesn't have or use analog sticks.
Oh, right.
And it turns out that navigating on the D-pad is horrible. It's been intentionally made for a horrible controller. And I found us just like, I just can't hack it. Actually, I'd rather just play Bloodborne again, since
so easy to forget. Like, so apparently the I didn't play the original Demon Souls on PS3, and apparently that had 8 directional movement for dodging and stuff. I saw that that's one of the things the remakes just straight up changed and made analog, because it was unacceptable. It's obviously unacceptable to players now. You just expect that stuff. I've used a lot of the PS5's strange analog triggers, and I found them to be like quite a fascinating way to interact with games, to add like a literal feeling of weight, because the triggers, as you pull them, they adjust often based on the weapon that you're holding, like how heavy it feels to bring to bear, how much it kicks literally your finger as you pull the trigger. It's quite a strange. It's almost like too literal to imagine it working, but in some games, like, it's starting to get really, really impressive. Like in Sifu, you could feel the rainfall through a really subtle rumble in the controller. And I didn't notice it even happening until I played it for like an hour. I was like, whoa, that's why this feels like, what this feels so atmospheric. It's like this tiny little thing in my hands is gently indicating that I'm being impacted by water. Like,
oh my god, that sounds amazing.
It is kind of. I was endlessly impressed by it. I've played loads of the like the Uncharted remaster and The Last of Us 2 on PS5 as well, and I don't think they take full advantage of it. But the additional kind of like the analog can Rumble be analog? The kind of variants of Rumble, like rhythm and precision and types of pulse it can give out, like, really does genuinely give you a sense of being in a place. Like, just those moments where you sort of forget you're holding a controller, and actually you're just kind of like desperately in a zombie fight that with a good combat system in the Last of Us, instead of a not so good combat system in a certain other zombie game, which is still very good. I like it. Should I love Bloodborne? Should I play this thing?
There's no harm in it. I also don't understand how it hasn't been taken down.
Right? Yeah,
obviously it's a massive trademark infringement. But yeah, why not have a go? It's only 135 megabytes. It's not gonna hurt to seek it out and download it.
Yeah, and they could have. Why didn't they just? They could have easily gotten around. It's almost like they're trying to get taken down. Surely, like, why not call it like Born of Blood DX5 or something? Like,
yeah,
it could just
I don't
exist.
know. They've straight up use PlayStation logos and stuff.
Really?
The sound files are from it's retextured and repolyed, but the sound files, as far as I can tell, are all from Bloodborne itself. So,
wow, cool.
It's audacious.
They're going to turn all of the cease and desist notices into NFTs, and that's how it's the secret money making strategy. I'll be richer than I'll ever be.
Should we call it there?
That sounds good to me. That feels satisfied and harried, but satisfied mostly.
That's all of the podcasts that we have time for this evening. If you'd like to tweet us, you can do so at Crate and Crowbar. All these recordings are uploaded as videos to YouTube, where you can find other nonsense by us. The address for that is youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. Thanks, as always, to our backers on Patreon. You can back us too, if you like, at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar, or you can simply join our lovely Discord community, the link for which is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. That's it. I've been Marsh Davis.
I've been Tom Senior, and thanks for
listening, everybody.